on Schenectady at Christian Fellowship. Between Linden and Lenox. Between Linden and Lenox. So Pastor Barnes will join us here now for, I believe, the opening prayer.
Good evening, everyone. At my church, when my wife is not present, my first duty is to speak about the whereabouts of the First Lady. So since this is a Northeastern Conference Family Life event, she would normally be here and would be involved in the program. But she is currently on a trip to go and pick up my parents. Isn't that interesting? She's gone to pick up my parents. Isn't that wonderful? That's good when you have a wife like that who will go take care of your parents. Of course, she left her mother here with me, so I'm taking care of her mother while she picks up my parents. And my parents are coming to live with us here in New York from Mandeville, Jamaica. So maybe it should be the other way. We should be going to Mandeville to Jamaica to live with them. But such is life. After I pray, Pastor Marks is going to come and give you a welcome. So I'm not going to have the opportunity to come back to speak, but I'd like to speak on behalf of the Northeastern Conference Family Ministries Department. Thank you for being here and welcome to our program. This program is sponsored by the Family Life Department, by Adventist for Social Justice, and by For Real Women. I see all of those leaders here, and we are going to have a fabulous time. Why? Because we've been created in the image of God, and that image is a powerful speaking being causing great things to happen through speaking. You saw that image when you read Genesis chapter 1, right? And that's who you are, speaking beings that can transform the world. And so through the conversation that we're going to have this afternoon, we're going to change how we do things as an organization, and we're going to be personally transformed in our lives and how we interact with each other around certain subjects and so forth. So thank you for coming. Stand up, please, and we will have our opening prayer. Great Creator God, we thank you for giving us all the gifts that you have given to us. We pray that as your Spirit leads and guides us, that we will indeed make great use of the wonderful insights that you have given to us. Make use of the convictions that you give to us. Make use of the practices that we take on that make a difference in our lives and the lives of those that we come in contact with. So we pray, Lord, that as we converse together today, that you would lead all of us, panelists and others, in the conversation as we consider the subject at hand, for it is an important subject in our lives and in the society around us. So, Lord, may we make a difference by your will and by your power. May we bring honor and glory to your name and make a difference in other people's lives as well. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Please have a seat. Pastor Marks.
Thank you, Pastor. It is my privilege to welcome you to the sprawling dimensions of the Flatbush Seventh-day Adventist Church. We are one of the proudest churches in New York City when it comes to the edifice we own. We are a 900 plus seating capacity sanctuary not to mention the office spaces that we have behind here and the fellowship hall and all of the other things that represent Flatbush. Not too many churches east of the Mississippi can make the same claim, particularly those in New York City. I know I'm bugging some of you out from Kingsborough right this minute. But I'm so happy to see you here, all of you, and welcome you. Wherever you're from, we are glad that you joined us. The invitation was out for several weeks, and I know that others are trying to get in. Some are struggling to park. We hope that they will be able to be on the inside before too much has already been said. As we said earlier, the program is being streamed, and so we want you to put on your best television act to enhance the production. And to those who are watching, we thank you for logging on, and we hope you will benefit from the information that will be shared. Those of us who are here will be blessed by not just the information, but by the inspiration. In the congregation, among us today, we have not only Pastor Barnes from the Northeastern Conference, staff of workers, we have Sister Barbara Hall. I'm not even clear on her job title. All I know is she's one of the big players at our office on Merrick Boulevard in Queens. Sister Hall is in charge of risk management. So all of the risks we confront that have to be processed and claims and all of those things run through her office, which keeps her stressed and busy, hence the big bucks she gets. Also here from the staff today is one of our own members, Mrs. Kathy Davis, who works in youth ministries. I want to recognize my fellow Northeastern Conference employees, having recognized Pastor Barnes. And now, I will turn the microphone over to Sister Tiffany Llewellyn, and she is going to walk us through the program and what we will do and how we'll participate and who the players are and what our privileges are going to be. Please welcome to the Flatbush Church and to the platform and the microphone, Sister Tiffany Llewellyn. Please.
Good afternoon, Flatbush. It is a pleasure to be here, and I am here with Crystal Ferguson, the AY leader at Kingsborough Temple, and Sunshine Sealy from Shiloh SDA. Adenergy, I'm sorry, that's her official last name. So thank you, Pastor Marks, for opening the doors of Flatbush for us to have this event here today. And we just wanted to speak a little bit about how we got here. I came across an article maybe about a month and a half ago that spoke to around or over 60% of Black children have been molested by the time they reach the age of 18. And that article was really, really unsettling for me for multiple reasons. One, as a youth director, as someone who works within the youth department, but primarily because of my role as a therapist. That's my official job. I work with children who have been diagnosed with severe psychiatric disorders. And a lot of my clients, a lot of my kids have been sexually abused or sexually molested. So that article really, really resonated. And when I thought about, wow, 60%, that's a huge number. And the kids are not only the kids that I'm seeing at my job, through my job. There has to be kids and people who have had this experience even within our churches. And why have I not been to an environment, an atmosphere, forum, a program, not saying that it doesn't happen, but why haven't I seen more resources, more spaces for us to come together and have this conversation? So I posted it, as I do everything, on Facebook. And the feedback was really, really powerful. I began to receive a lot of messages from people who have had their own experiences, who really wanted to be a part of creating this space and creating this opportunity for us to have a conversation that's considered taboo, or a conversation that is just not readily had. So that's how I ended up teaming up with Sunshine and Crystal, and we came together to figure out how do we want to chart this course. And then discovering that we can't do this on our own, so I reached out to people that I consider to be the huge power woman, or women that I look up to, which is Sister Richards, who we'll introduce later on, and Dr. Barnes. And that's how we eventually came together to collaborate on this event.
I'd just like to add, in my work as the school counselor for Northeastern Academy, it is an alarming rate that our young people have been affected by sexual abuse, and they feel like they haven't had the environment to speak on this. And so a lot of people are silencing themselves because they don't feel like they have that power. They don't feel like they have that comfortable space to be able to release that information and have it not be used against them. So it's important for us to continue creating this space, because this is not going to be the first or the last conversation. It has to be ongoing, as the healing process must be ongoing.
How I became involved in this effort is because, well, of Tiffany and her Facebook post. And when I saw the post, I said, look, Tiff, I have to be a part of this. Why? Because it really hit home for me as a survivor, as someone not speaking about it, not, acknowledging that it happened. I needed to just release, let it go. So I applaud Tiffany for even, saying that we should get this done, because I don't myself see it in any of our churches. I haven't been to any, I haven't heard of any. So I am very glad, and thank you for starting this.
So at this time, we are going to open up. Crystal is going to do a spoken word poem. So do we all know the appropriate response to a spoken word poem at the end? All right, look at you guys, fabulous, you know what's going on. Okay, so let's just honor the space that Crystal is going to create.
Good evening again. I wanted to end my life that night, but he did it for me. My spirit murdered, so I stayed. Terrified, he started to reveal his truth after violating me, telling me he was formerly incarcerated for murdering a man. Additional fear now induced. Labored pain for the rest of my life. We keep walking through life with a Band-Aid on a wound that needs to be exposed. Exposed to remove suffocation of the healing process that we keep delaying. The reason it is hard to address the brokenness is because we've warped ourselves to the idea that we can operate without acknowledgement, just cutting off the branches without addressing the root. Cutting off the branches without addressing the root. Levels and layers. There is a need for unraveling. With respect for our pain, we refrained from addressing such unresolved issues, bottling up our experiences for fear of judgment, no consolation, which formed breeding grounds for isolation, forcing silent suffrage. Growing up broken, believing we were born this way. The question I ask is, who were you before they hurt you? What failed your spirit and caused you to lock up, feeling that this was now your extended reality? Boy, girl, woman, man, you are under arrest. You have the right to not remain silent. That pain you feel, the one you choose not to reveal, is killing you softly. The words unspoken screams volumes when I look into your eyes. Your actions are cries, suffocating beneath the hurt, the lies, the pain, and the residue of violation. Your mediums of distraction, escapism, overly involved in church, drinking, smoking, shopping, overachieving, covering up the hurt, coffee, marijuana, crack, gossip, emotional high, esteem lows, church hurt, open wounds, guilty pleasures, human, boy, girl, woman, man, you are under arrest. Here lies your Miranda warning. You have the right to not remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used to release you. You have the right to speak to a therapist and have the Holy Spirit present during any questioning as you begin your healing process. You have the right. Please do not remain silent. For too long, we sit and wait for authorization to be free from our chains, the chain of events that binds us to progressional imprisonment. What is meant for us to separate from, we clinch on because the uncomfortable place has now become a habitat of security. Extract the lesson, release the pain. Extract the lesson, release the pain. Your existence from support to resistance, be grateful. You have acquired strengths and acknowledged temporary limitations. In this wounded liberation, be clear, dig deeper, release the pain, let the growth finally speak, let the air you breathe become a little note to keep going. You have the right, please do not remain silent.
Powerful, right? Extremely powerful. So in order to sort of take us through this evening's conversation, I knew that it was not a job that I can do. So I reached out immediately. I thought of, okay, Sister Richards definitely has to be a part of whatever is happening here. I am a huge fan of Sister Norca Blackman Richards. I love her tremendously. She is the founder and CEO of For Real Women International, which is a nonprofit that services women and girls in the USA and internationally. She's a partner in ministry with her husband of 27 years, Dr. Pastor Warner Richards, who's the senior pastor at Linden SDA Church. She's a daughter of missionary parents born in the Republic of Panama, and she currently teaches and administrates the Parsi East Sutton Sikh program at Queens College. And when we were looking for moderators and facilitators for this conversation, we knew that Sister Richards was the exact person that can help get us where we needed to be. So she will serve as one of our moderators. And our second moderator is Dr. Sajita Sutton. She was born in St. Lucia, and she's lived in multiple islands since then. She was educating here in the USA, and she currently serves as an elder at the Kingsborough Temple Church. She currently works as the Assistant Vice President of Behavioral Health at the Interfaith Medical Center. And she also is educated as a clinical psychologist. And when we looked for a second facilitator, we knew that Dr. Sutton was highly recommended and who we can trust to guide this conversation as well. So at this time, I want to invite up our facilitators, and they will introduce the panel, and then we will begin. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So it's my honor to introduce the first four members of the panel. The first one is Sunshine Adeniji. I always say it wrong. She's a devoted mother of three, a wife of one. She hails from the beautiful Trinidad and Tobago, and as the owner of Shiny Creations, she enjoys sewing and creating unique crafts for clients. Sunshine has always had a love for children, and so it's only fitting that she and her husband own a daycare center located here in Brooklyn. She hopes to continue to inspire as much people as she can by sharing her experiences with others. So welcome, Sunshine. Next, we have Claudette Jackson. She was born just outside of Manchester, England, to Jamaican parents Selwyn and Joyce Jackson. They migrated to the United States in 1968. She has 4 sisters and 3 brothers, one of which passed away 3 years ago. Claudette is currently a nurse working in hematology oncology clinic, and she loves nursing and loves her patients. It took many years for Claudette to get out of the victim mentality that has robbed her of living her best life, but she realizes that she knows and loves a God that is not hindered by time and will help her to reclaim hers. She's excited to see where he will take her, and she's serious about sharing her story and hopefully helping to be a voice for those who are trying to find theirs. So I invite you to welcome Sister Claudette Jackson. Next, we have Latoya Hazel Wright. She joined 4RWI in 2012. Latoya has joined its roster of sought-after and powerful speakers. She's a native of St. Lucia. I was very happy to hear that when I met her. Latoya is an author, motivational speaker, mentor, and entrepreneur. Learning from both positive and negative experiences of her life, she gained insight and wisdom that propelled her into action to help others. She has become an advocate for victims of abuse and domestic violence. She writes devotionals and established a ministry for abuse awareness and healing. She has obtained a bachelor's degree in criminal justice with extensive training in child abuse and domestic violence. Latoya also served as the assistant chaplain for Blue Mountain Academy in Pennsylvania and currently serves in the North American Division as the administrative support for the Ministerial Association. She is the mother of 2 college-age daughters and a teenage son. Her hope is that her influence helps women and girls see that they can arise above any adversity. So please welcome Latoya. Last, we have, but not least, Christine Honoré. And I want to quote one of her favorite Bible passages taken from Joel 2, verse 22 and 26. And I will restore to you the years that the locusts have eaten, the cankerworm and the caterpillar and the palmer worm, my great army which I sent among you. And ye shall eat in plenty and be satisfied and praise the name of the Lord your God, that have dwelt wondrously with you, and my people shall never be ashamed. Christine is blessed with an amazing husband that loves God and was blessed with 3 children. And she says that her husband's amazing because he loves God. She lives right here in Brooklyn and works at the Brooklyn SDA School. She's also the women's ministry leader at her church, and her goal, she has actually 2 goals: to seek and bring women out of abusive situations, and to continue to work with her son, who is in the process of being healed from autism. So I ask you to welcome Sister Christine. So they're going to tell you their story, but we have just a few ground rules to make this place a safe space as they share. I want to say that in my field, usually we hear these stories behind closed doors after people have been promised that everything that they share behind those closed doors will be kept private. So for these 4 individuals to agree to come and state this publicly here with you, I ask that you respect them, not judge what they're about to share, because it's a very difficult thing for them to do. Some of them, this is their first time sharing this publicly. Some have shared it numerous times, and so I think that you are being afforded a very unique opportunity, and I ask that you respond in kindness and in respect as they share their story. So I'm going to start. We'll just start and go down the line. That was her plan? That's why you sat there? Okay, so we're going to start with LaToya.
Hello, everyone. As Dr. Sutton said, I am from St. Lucia, and that's where my story begins. I was about 6 years old, and you know how we call everybody auntie and uncle? You know, it doesn't matter whether they're blood or not. You know, if they're a close relative or close friend, it's uncle so-and-so and auntie so-and-so. And so this was Uncle so-and-so who had a banana shed, and I used to have to help him when we would visit to go bring bananas from the shed into the house. And so this is where it started with him touching me and fondling me. And I couldn't say anything because it was Uncle so-and-so. And you're taught to respect them as if they are your relative. And so every time we went to visit, I would be chosen to go and help him bring bananas. And so every time he would touch me and fondle and everything else. As a child, you don't know what's happening. You really don't. You're actually learning what trust is and what's supposed to be normal from the people that you love. And so I couldn't understand what was happening. I just knew that he was supposed to protect me as uncle, and so I didn't say anything about it. It wasn't until a few years later, I was a teenager in high school, and so he lived in the country, I lived in the city, and so I was walking home from school one day, and he was at my gate, and he said to me, he had moved up there and just gave me the warning, which we so often hear. If you say something, I will tell them that it's your fault, and I will tell them that you wanted it. So that began the silencing of my story. Eventually, I did gain the strength to tell my grandmother and my uncle because I was always able to speak to them, and they believed me. My mother didn't, and that silenced me again. I did confide in a couple of friends, and they believed me, and so they walked with me home from school every day to make sure I was safe. And that kept me from him doing it ever again. Unfortunately, it doesn't end there because your body still has to deal with the effects of what was done to you. And so when I became a teenager, hormones kicked in, and I didn't know what to do. So I became extremely promiscuous, and I was born a Seventh-day Adventist. I was born in this church. So it wasn't anything outside of the parameters of the church. So I became extremely promiscuous by the time I had moved to the United States. And the fact that my mother did not believe me was a secondary hurt. It was like it happened all over to me again, and there was no protection. So when I say promiscuous, I used my body to do what it felt it needed to do to satisfy whatever it felt it needed. And so basically, there were a lot of urges that I didn't know what to do with. And I went to individuals in the church, mothers in the church, to say, this is what's happening to me, and don't talk about this stuff here. And so I was labeled fast, and I was labeled, they call it jamet in my country, like a little slut, a little whore. And, you know, I was they were told to stay away from me, and the little boys to stay away from me, and just having then the additional label was extremely painful because I didn't understand what was going on with me. I didn't want to do it, and every place I sought help from told me that something was wrong with me, and the only place I knew was church. And so I left, and I started the party scene in New York on the weekend, and I allowed any man who would give me attention to do whatever he wanted to do with me. And throughout these times, I would still be in the midst of it, praying and crying out to God to help me. But without God's grace, I should have been dead many times. I should be pregnant many times. I should have diseases over and over again, but God covered me. He covered me. Even though I was still broken and I still didn't know what was going on, He still held it together for such a time as this, I believe. But it didn't stop there, because if you don't get healing, the cycle continues. And so in order for me to stop, I assumed that if I got married, then I would be okay with the church again. It would be legal to do what I was doing. And so there was a man who knew me from the islands and found me again. And in his eyes, he felt I should have been with him, and I wanted a way out. And I'm able to say this really frankly to you because I've reconciled with Christ. And so what I share with you, good, bad, or indifferent, is, it's just part of my journey. But I did use him in order to stop, I felt, to come out of it. So I went into a relationship with him, and we were having a premarital sex, because I could not stop. But I felt that because it was within, the Christian setting, it was okay. Until the pastor that we had, the church started to complain and gossip a lot. They knew that we were living together. Instead of coming to us, they gossiped, and they went to the pastor. And they snickered, and they did a lot of stuff behind our backs. And so we were told, if you cannot not have sex, then fine. But if you can't, then get married. And that was not the right advice, because that's not premarital counseling. That's just saying, if you can't stop having sex, just get married. And that is not the reason why we go into a marital covenant. But I was 19 years old. I don't know any better. So we got married. And that became the beginning of an extremely abusive relationship, because this man felt that he had total control over me. And many times when I wanted to leave and go back to my mother's house, he would say to me, "Where are you going? Nobody wants you. Do you remember what you are? You better stay right here." And as much as I had the opportunity to go, I didn't. I stayed. Because when you're broken, you really don't have the courage to do what you're supposed to do. So I stayed. And I had 3 beautiful children who are my world to him. My grace, I call from God. And I stayed in that relationship for a good 13 years. I was undocumented, which added another level of oppression and abuse. I came here undocumented, and I lived in America 25 years undocumented. And every time I wanted to go, he would say, "Where are you gonna go? You can't get a job. No one's gonna hire you. You can't do anything. Just sit your behind," and I'm not gonna use the colorful words, "just stay here." So he never hit me, but I wish he did. And I'm gonna be very transparent with you, because the mental and the emotional cut so much deeper that it even reaches into the spiritual soul. It even makes you not trust God anymore. It even makes you believe that God doesn't love you. And it makes you believe that you are literally nothing, even in the kingdom. A wound will heal, even though it's still wrong. But when you come to church all dressed up, looking super fine and praising God on the praise team and as a youth leader, and there are not any scars, when you tell someone that you are being battered, they do not believe you, because a lot of us go by sight and not faith when someone says something is happening. I had treasurers from my church say to me, "What's your problem? Why are you complaining? The man is working and providing for you. Just keep your mouth shut and deal with it." And so that is what I had to deal with. And so when we got married, I went to prayer meeting and they asked for prayer requests like we do before we pray. And I raised my hand and I said, my marriage is in trouble. And the dear mother behind me pulled me down and said, "You do not talk about this stuff in the house of God. This is not the time. Go home and give the man sex. It is obvious that he's not being satisfied. So cut the nonsense out, Toya, and go give him what he needs before another woman does." That was the second set of silence in my own home church. But I have a grandmother who has always told me that your voice is your number one weapon, and it always rang true in my head. So I started to educate myself as much as I could about what was going on with my body, about why I was making the decisions I was making, about why I was being so bitter, about why I was in this relationship and I was allowing this individual to be okay with what he was doing with me. And it was people outside of the church, Sunday worshipers, who gave me opportunities to go to their church and to share my story. And at first it was really daunting, but the more I shared, the more people came forward, and the more they invited me to other Sunday church events, and I became an advocate instead of remaining a victim. And praying that as the more I speak, the more God will heal. And I tell you this much, I knew God was in this, even though we talk about why God allows things to happen. I understood what all things work together meant. When I decided to take my own life, I ended up falling for another individual within my marriage. And instead of getting the understanding of why I ended up doing that, I was ostracized, and the church dragged me down to the ground. And because I felt that I had pained God so much and I failed him in the marriage, I decided to kill myself. And so I wrote a letter stating that in the second coming, that people would know that it wasn't Christ's fault, that he did everything he was supposed to do, and it was all on me. I went to the dentist to get a root canal, and I opened my eyes and I saw a throne. And as I ran to that throne, a hand stopped me on the shoulder and said, "I have to talk to you." I sat down, and the Son of God showed me from before my mother got pregnant, as a teenage Catholic girl who was going to be baptized in the church, how he saw me from then, and he saw everything, and he showed me everything, and he said, "Don't you think I know that this day would come? And don't you think I still love you? So I want you to understand you're going to use all of these things together, and you're going to show people what true grace and mercy is." And he said, "You're not ready yet to go to the throne." I came out of it, and from that day, I knew that no matter how painful it was, I will share it, because there is no shame in my story. My story is a story of redemption. My story is a story of grace. My story is a story of a lot of pain. I still deal with it. I have children. I have a daughter who has now gone through it. But when For Real Women called and asked if I would become part of it, I knew that it was another opportunity to continue sharing. So it's an honor to be here. It's a glorious day, I believe, because I know that somebody's chains are going to be broken today. Somebody's child or an adult is going to finally say, "I yield," and I know that there is hope, because when you see 4 women who've been through it and still able to smile like we're the queens that we are, that God has a greater plan, and truly all things work together for the good, for those that love him.
So, hello again, everyone. Sunshine. My story. This is literally the first time I'm actually like talking about it in an open setting. Um, I so I am 31 years old. At about the age of 6, I remember vividly, like in Trinidad, we would, as children, you know, everyone is anywhere they want to be. We go up and down. Parents don't really have to worry about them. Everyone is together. I was with my brother and my cousin. We all went to the standpipe, you know, we played around in the water, and we ended up going back home. My brother and my cousin, they said they wanted to go to my grandparents' house. Now, their house was like on a hill from our home, and they wanted to go pick Chenet. So I'm like, ooh, I wanna come. They were like, no, you can't come with us. Because, you know, I'm the girl, the 2 boys. They're like, no, you can't come with us. I was pretty much a little tomboy. I was climbing trees, climbing rocks, doing everything that they would do. When they finally decided, all right, fine, you can come with us. So they said, only if you hurry up and you don't take long. They already started to leave me. So I'm like, wait a minute, they can't leave me, I wanna go. So I just left my wet underwear on. I just pulled on a skirt and pulled on a shirt, and I ran out the house and I went to meet them. So we got there, and by this time, my grandparents were already dead. My grandfather's son, this is my mom's half-brother, he used to live in the house at this time. When we got there, my brother said to me, you can't come and climb the trees with us because you decided to put on a skirt. So you can't come and climb the tree. I'm like, but I want to pick Chenet also. He's like, no, you can't come climb the tree. So he's like, we were under the house, because the house was like a tall, on some stilts, and there was the area under the house where we could play or whatever. And he's like, just stay here and we're gonna go and we'll come back and get you when we're done. So my uncle, he had come down from the house, and when my brother and my cousin, they climbed the tree, and I was just sitting there waiting for them. When he came down, he said, oh, I have zabuka. Americans, you guys know it as avocado. So he said, I have some zabuka for your mom, because there were a lot of trees, a lot of fruit trees, everything at my grandparents' house, where like down at our house, we only had like a few of them. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'm gonna come and get it. And I got up, and there was a wet spot where I was sitting, because obviously I left on the wet underwear. So went upstairs, he made a statement, you know, that my clothes was wet. I'm like, yeah, I know, we were playing in the standpipe, you know. So I remember him, he went to the table to get the zabuka, and there were a bunch of big ones there, and he said, you know, this is for your mom, whatever. And I'm like, okay. So I'll take it for her, and I got ready to just take it and go back down to wait for my brother and my cousin. And he held on to me, and he said, let me dry you up. I'm like, I don't need to be dried. He said, no, I'm gonna dry it for you. And then he said, who would you tell if I dry you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, who would you tell? And I'm like, I'll tell my mom. And he's like, no, you can't tell your mom. And I'm like, why? He's like, you just can't tell your mom. So who else would you tell? And I said, I'll tell Jesus. And apparently that was a good enough answer for him. He said, yes, you can tell Jesus. And I remembered like trying to get away from him and to go back downstairs, and he held on to me. He picked me up and he took me to one of the back rooms. And this room, there were some huge windows, and I could literally see my brother and my cousin in the trees, yelling to and fro at each other, picking the chenet, having fun. And he put me on the bed and he took my underwear off, and he, he was saying, look, there's a hole there. And I'm like, yeah, it's supposed to be there. And he just proceeded to do whatever he decided. And he said to me when he was done, I was wishing like my brother would look in and just see what's going on and just come out of that tree. Because my brother and I, we have like this really close relationship. And the funny thing is, I felt like he would have been the one to protect me, even though my brother was about 8. He was like 7 and a half, 8 years old. And I'm like, he would have been the one to protect me. But they never saw what happened. And I remember at the end, when I fixed my clothes, he said, don't say anything to your mom or I would kill her. And that, like, as a 6-year-old child, I don't want my mom to die. So my mom was like everything, because at that point, my father had moved on, he left, and it was just us. It was just us and my mom. And I'm like, he's gonna kill my mom. When we left the room, he literally took some money and put it in my hand. And I was so confused by that. I was confused. And I went back downstairs and I sat there. And after a while, my brother and they came out and they had a bunch of chenet. And I guess they could tell that something was wrong. He's like, what's the matter? Because I didn't look, the same bubbly kid who was just there. He's like, what's the matter? And I'm like, nothing. I'm like, let's go. I want to go home. And I remember there was like a ravine that we had to go down and cross over to get back down to our house. And as we were passing there, I dropped the money, and they didn't see me drop it. And my brother, he saw the money in the water. He's like, oh, look what I found. And he picked it up. And on the way to the house, there's this shop. So he went there and he bought, you call it sucker bags, for the 3 of us. And I just said, I don't want it. He's like, why? I'm like, I don't want it. So he's like, all right, fine, more for me. And we went down, we went home, and I went inside, I changed my clothes and everything, and I was sitting at the kitchen counter. My mom, my aunts were there. They were all talking, and I contemplated telling my mom, saying something to her. And I think at the point where I got comfortable to think to say something to my mom, who walks through the door? He walked through the door, and I just froze. He said, he had the zabaka for my mom and that we forgot to take it. So he brought it for her. And I remember I got up and we had like this secret area of the house that we would go to. And I remember getting up and I just went in there and I sat there until he left. And I had never said anything to my mom about it until I was probably 16, no, about 14 or 15. I was early high school, and it came out because my mom found out that I was having sex. And when she found out, it was like this whole big thing. This, you know, it's like the Seventh-day Adventist family, even the Caribbean family, because you know, Caribbean moms, they're like, listen. And I remember I just blurted it out. I would have never known anything about sex if Uncle didn't touch me. And she was just stunned. She didn't say anything, she just looked at me. And she asked me, she said, when did this happen? How? Like, why didn't you say anything? And when I initially said it, I was like, crap, why did I just say that? And looking back at it now, it was a pretty messed up way to say it to her, but I felt like I got it out. There was a little release that now she knew. I remember she made a couple phone calls, and I don't really know what happened after that. We didn't really talk about it anymore. There was nothing said about it. A few years later, after I was in college, this is like still stuff that's buried after my marriage. I got married at 22, and I was in a creative writing class, and there came a point where the teacher wanted us to write about, most of the class we were doing fiction. She wanted us to write about nonfiction, and for some reason that was the only thing that came to mind to write about. And I wrote this insanely long story about what happened, and it felt good to write about it because I have always been like a writer, know how to put words together. And I remember the entire class, because we would read, everyone would have to make a copy of their work so that the entire class would read it, critique it. And I remember the entire class, they didn't even know what to say. No one gave any critique. They were just shocked. I remember the teacher, she gave one critique about it, and it was to make some part of it see something that I wrote. She said readers would want to be like, see more of it. So I expanded on that, and that was it. And I remember getting an A on that paper, and that was another part of the release for me. And since then, it's just been like, I don't talk about it. And this is like my first time actually talking to people about it. So it feels good that I can sit here and be like, hey, this happened. And I don't have to be like, just keep it in and be like it was my fault, because at this age now, I know it wasn't my fault, that it was him. So I'm just glad that I'm able to be here and able to share, and hope that, it helps someone.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Claudette Jackson, as I was introduced, and one thing that was left out of my bio is that I have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. My daughter and granddaughter are here with me, and I'm glad that they are. I came to this country with my brothers and sisters and my parents in October of 1968. And we lived with one of my dad's cousin, who, if you were to see them side by side, they would look like twins, but they weren't. And at the age of 9, I was almost 10, but at the age of 9 is when my abuse started. So imagine you come to a new country, you're learning the culture, people, kids your age are picking on you because your accent is different, you look different to them, and it's just a whole new environment. And what happened was, one evening, this cousin, I was in the kitchen washing the dishes. My dad had gone to work. He worked nights. My mom was somewhere upstairs, I can't remember, but I was the only one downstairs. And he came up behind me and asked me what I was doing. It was obvious, but, and I told him what I was doing, and he started rubbing my back and, started going lower and lower, and then going around and, to my chest area, and I froze. I didn't know anything about sex, but I know that this was something that should not be happening. And when I said to, what you doing, and to stop, and I was going to look for my mom, I was told, if you go and tell your mom, then you all were going to have to go back to England. You can't stay here. I will call the authorities, and you're just going to have to go back. You'll be sent back. I know that adults who do this kind of thing, I believe that they watch the children and they study you. I had, like I said, it was 5 of us that came over, 2 boys and 2 girls, and I was the oldest of the 5. My brothers were close in age and my sisters were close in age, and I always felt the odd man out because I didn't have anyone where I felt that I could relate to and I could talk to, so I was the loner of everyone. So I couldn't go to my brothers, and I didn't feel I could go to them. I was older than them, and I felt I was a protector, but I also felt that I didn't belong. For years, I felt that I was adopted, actually, because I just felt that I just did not belong in that family. But he, I'm sure, studied me because everybody else were very outspoken. I was the quiet one. I did as I was told. I was very respectful. And regardless of what it was, if the directive came from an adult and the adult was family, I did it. So I didn't go to my parents because I did not want to be the one who would be the reason why they had to leave the country, because they came like a lot of West Indian parents who migrate here for a better life and better opportunity. So he knew how to push the buttons. And because he knew that if he said that and that I would listen and not say anything, that he could now go further and further, which is what he did. I remember my dad sending me to his office one day to pick up something. He was a realtor, and he said, send Marie, they call me by my middle name, send Marie to get the information. So I went there. And I came in, and he had someone there and had me waiting for a long time. After the meeting was over and they left, he locked the office door. And I panicked, but there was nothing that I could do, nowhere that I could go. He said, come, I want to show you something. There was a bathroom in the back, and he proceeded to, once again, have sex. Okay. This went on because I had lost my voice. I didn't have a voice. So this went on until the age of 17. And I will never forget that I was told when I was leaving, as I decided I was not going to go to any college in New York, I had to get away. And I was told that, oh, you're leaving? You're going to college? Good. Me glad you're going, because me could have never stopped. I did not want to go, but I had to go. And I kept calling my sisters, and without telling them who it was, I just kept badgering them all the time. Are you okay at home? Is anyone bothering you? What's going on? What's going on? But I just couldn't tell them who it was. I couldn't. I know that this has affected every area of my life, every area. I became promiscuous also, so it's true. You lose your voice, you don't think that you're worth anything good. And anything that happens to you, you feel that it's your fault. You asked for it. And you feel that whatever comes, you accept it, because that's just what you're supposed to have. When I got married, I have to say now, I mean, he was a good guy, but I didn't love him. It was, oh, wow, okay, this guy says he loves me, and he wants to marry, okay. I guess that's okay. I guess there's something redeemable. But it didn't work out. He was not an abuser. Well, not a physical abuser. But, and I know now it's because I did not have a voice why that was one of the reasons it didn't work out. I also know now that I should have never married him. I married for the wrong reasons. Not because he was not a good person, but because he was not the person for me, and I was not at a place in my life where I should have been in any relationship. So it didn't work out. But I started going to, having therapy like about 3 times. In my head, I knew that I needed therapy, but I could not complete it because every time I tried, it was so overwhelming that I literally could not breathe. I would sit there and I would start to talk, or they would start to try to give me, various things to do or advice, treatment plan, or however you want to put it, and I would literally start hyperventilating. I could not. I started praying about it. I railed with God. Why did you have this happen? I was a child. Why did you put me through this? Why? And one day I was talking to Elder Kay at Kingsborough. She was saying that she wanted to do a program, I think, and about abuse. And out of my mouth said, I will talk. I don't know where that came from, but it just literally came. I said, I will talk. I will share my story. And she looked at me like, what? And I said, yes, I'll share my story. And I did. And it was through sharing that story that someone in the audience pulled me aside after and said, I'm glad you shared your story, but you need help. And then that person and I started talking and started having meetings, and that's what caused me to, or allowed me to start to vent and to release. It's not an easy road. It's something that none of us will ever forget. I cry sometimes for the little girl that lost her childhood at 9 years. That's where my childhood stopped, at 9 years old. And I cry a lot for her. But the tears, like these tears, they're cleansing tears. So when I cry and I stop, it's a healing process. And I can now look in the mirror and say, you're not half bad, girl. I know that I have a long way to go still, but I think sharing my story is part of the healing process. And whenever I can, and if I'm able, I will. But know that we have to really find a safe place for, especially young, and it happens, I know, to male as well as female, but we have, those of us who have gone through it, I know for more than 40 years I wore a mask. And you learn as you get older to decompartmentalize these feelings just so you can survive. It's a surviving mechanism. And what you're showing everybody is not the real you. You're showing what you want them to see because you don't want them to know that you're, for lack of a better word, damaged goods. And we're not damaged goods, but I'm just saying this is how we've looked at ourselves for so long. So we make lousy decisions. We get into lousy relationships. Even with my daughter, I was so, because of what I went through, I was so, I wouldn't even say so much, mine was in a sense kind of the opposite. I had no voice. So I could not, I mean, my mind's eye would look at her, but I couldn't share with her what I went through until many years later. You know, and I remember when I started sharing with her, she said, Mommy, I wish you had shared that with me, because maybe some of the decisions I made, I would not have made. We're so beaten down, we lose our voice. I completely lost mine. And that I feel at times that I was not as good a mother as I could have been to her, because I just did not have what I needed to make sure that she was equipped, you know, to make the right decisions. So we really have to I beg of you, parents who have young children, I beg of you to talk to them, to make a safe place for them. Growing up under West Indian parenting, we grow up as children are to be seen and not heard, you know, and you know they give us what they know, but they're not really loving, and when I say loving, they love you in their mind and in their hearts, I'm sure, but they don't express it. So you kind of hold back and you feel that you can't always, you know, you're just to be good, you know, and you can't always come to them. I never felt that I could come to my parents and talk to them. Even before this cousin said what he said, I never felt comfortable enough to talk to my parents that way. So I think if I did, maybe I would have been able to go to them, and maybe that would have stopped. I don't know. But we need to really open up with our children, and we need to be transparent and share them, the good, the bad, the ugly, in what you did, because you really could save them. You know, and that's my story.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christine. I grew up in the country of Guyana, came here when I was 11 years old, 10, somewhere around there. But my story began at the age of 3. I have great memories. Began at the age of 3. I remember at the daycare, I even remember the color of the uniform, it was pink and white. And I remember at the daycare, I would see all my little friends, we were playing, running about. We used to wear these little pink dresses with the little ruffle underwears. Yeah. And I would see, when I look across, I would see, his name is Mr. Apollo. He would be there, and I would see the little girl in front of him, but I don't know what he's doing. All I would see is her body's just going like this. But I'm little myself. I don't know until it happened to me. He was pulling up my underwear. Nothing was wrong with me. I didn't use the bathroom or anything. He was just pulling up my underwear. Other little children are running around. It was a care provider where you have the person in charge, but that's her son. And I remember it like yesterday. I felt his fingers between my legs, but he can't go but so far. And he's talking to me. I can't remember what he was saying, but he's in my face and he's just playing with me, you know? I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell my grandmother because I felt that I did something wrong at that age. I lived with my grandmother and grandfather. I was spoiled because I was the first grandchild. My grandmother left, came to this country, and I was left in the care of my aunt. At the age of 6, possibly 7, my aunt sexually molested me. Aunt. She made me do things to her. I can smell her like it was yesterday. Yes. However, it didn't stop there. My mother my mother decided that she's going to gather all her children together. I was the only one that was not living with her. So I ended up living with my mother. I felt like I was living in Hell's Kitchen. Between the age of 7, 8, I started living with my mother. Sometimes I wonder why she called me Christine, because that's my name. But she named me Christine, but she never called me Christine. She called me the female dog name a lot. Yes. Slut, whore. Yes, these are the things that she called me. And my favorite one was, you there, girl. You there, girl, come here. You there, girl, come there, do this, do that. I have 3 brothers. My mother would always call me a notorious liar. I didn't even know what that meant. Didn't. Everything my brothers would do, they would run to her and say, she did it. And boy, would I get a beating. I will get a beating out of this world. My mother would beat me with anything that she can find. I have gotten beaten with electric, you know, the telephone cords. Woo, that one, boy. One time, I was trying to run from her. I don't know if to run or stay, which one is better. I tried to run one time and the cord connected, right there. And it's like I almost saw Jesus' toes, because if I had seen his face, I would have been dead. That pain was horrid. So it went on. All the name calling. My brothers never respected me. My mother said to me, one night I woke up and she was sitting on the bed and she was just looking at me. And I looked at her, I'm like, what is what she see on me or something? And she said, every time you're sleeping, sometimes I just want to kill you in your sleep. What am I supposed to do? Go back to sleep. She did me so many things, but I'm just gonna, it's what I'm telling you, it's a morsel off of a 3-tier cake. It's nothing compared to what I've been through. To the point that when she goes out, because my brothers never respected me, my brothers, all 3 of them, molested me. Every time she would go out, I know what's coming. And I can't say anything because you know what? I'm a notorious liar. So I didn't say anything. It happened that we were getting ready to come here. So for most Guyanese, you know that Brazil is like right next door, you can just hop across. So she went to Brazil to buy and sell whatever so that we can get here. And she left us in the care of our neighbor. So my brothers went to sleep. Well, you know, we were sharing a house. So I don't know, in the Caribbeans, it's like the room you can actually jump over, go over into the other room. Right. So I'm sitting there, and my brothers are sleeping. And I just got hungry. And Judith, who is the next door neighbor, she said to me, Christine, are you hungry? I said, oh, yeah. She said, well, you know what? I have some food. Would you want it? I said, yes. So she came and she gave me the food. It was full of pepper, but I loved it, you know? She left, and her husband said, Christine, do you want some cold water? I said, sure. I got the water. I came back inside. I'm eating and everything. He said, Christine, I'm going to look out for Judith. Do you want to come? Of course I want to go and look out. I like looking out through the window. At night, there's excitement going on the street. So I went and I was looking out the window with him. Then he said something to me. He said, do you have a boyfriend? My antennas went up. Now, if a female would say something like that to you, you would blush. But the minute a man says something like that to you, something else is up. So I said to him, I lied. I said, my father is coming to see if we're okay, so maybe I should go back in my room. So I started back, and for some reason, I felt myself pulled into a dark corner. And all of a sudden, I felt his tongue trying to get into my mouth. He's trying to get into my underwear. And I don't know, I believed it was my guardian angel that just joined with me in the fight. And I fight him, and he scratched my hands. And I ran into the room. I don't know how I got away, but I would like to say my guardian angel did that. And I got into the room, and I locked the door, and I sat on the bed. And I'm looking up at the wall because I said, boy, he's going to come over, he's going to come over, he's going to get me, he's going to get me. And I sat there, and I'm looking up. And when next morning, I opened my eyes, I was still in the same position, looking at the wall with my eyes, closed. And I heard Judith saying to him, okay, no, he's saying to her, okay, honey, I'll see you, bye. And they kissed. I heard everything, and then he left. And I said, Judith, can I come over? She said, yes. So I went over. I said, Judith, I want to tell you something. I want to tell you that something happened last night. She said, what happened? What did your brothers do? I said, not my brothers. She said, what happened? I said, last night when you left, Kenrick tried to rape me. You little mother's favorite words, female dog, slut, whore, and all of that. And you're a notorious lie, because she heard my mother said all these things to me, so she's saying it back to me. She cursed me out and told me, get out of her room. I went back over into my room. So now our house is situated that you can look over and see the other neighbor. She went and she called out, Miss Benjamin, you know what, this little. And she cursing at me, and I'm standing at the window opposite Miss Benjamin, and she's looking at me. And I'm saying, showing her the action, what he's doing while she's going off. And Miss Benjamin was so mad. She said, you girl, come over here. So I'm like, I'm in trouble now. I went over, and she said she believed me. And you're not going back over there. You're going to stay here until your mother come home. When my mother came home, it took my mother 3 hours to come to see what was wrong with me. She came over, she sat there, she spoke with Miss Benjamin and told Miss Benjamin, I'm a little liar. A little liar, okay? But Miss Benjamin believed me. You understand? I wrote a letter to my mom, to my aunt abuser, because she showed me love. Most abusers do things like that to try to so that you would forget what they have done to you, and she did a very good job because she became my favorite aunt. Isn't that something? So this is what happened. I wrote her a letter, and I told her, do not write my mother back. I stole my mother money, I got stamped, and I mailed the letter. I came home from school one day, and I saw my mother. She was sewing something, but she was reading a letter. She had the needle, like, reading and, like picking her teeth or something with the needle. I don't know, but she had the needle like that. She said, you there, girl. When she called me, it's like I saw Satan, because I know I was in trouble. I don't know what's going to happen, but something is going to happen. You wrote a letter to your aunt. I said, oh, God. I told her not to write back to myself, You know what she tried to do? She took that needle, and she tried to sew my lip up. When she realized that she couldn't do that, she took the needle and started to puncture my lip. She just kept going at it. And when she was done, it was red with blood. That's not it. I told you I was in hell. There was a time that she beat me so hard. Can I please stand up? I can't sit. There's a time that she beat me so hard that my whole behind, both cheeks, she beat me so hard that on both cheeks I had sores as big as the palm of my hands on both sides. I got up for church that morning, took a shower, put on my underwear, put on my stockings, put on my slip and my dress. I'm taking time to tell you what I put on so you'll understand what happened. When I was in church, I needed to use the bathroom. So I went to use the bathroom. I tried to lift my dress up. You got it. It did not come up. It stayed there. I couldn't get to relieve myself. So I peeped through the door. I said, can you please call my mother? I have a problem. She came. She tried to get the dress up. Couldn't get it up because everything was sealed in. So she had to pull and pull. You know what? We had to burst the stockings, and you know what you do when you're in emergency and pull aside. But then we still had the problem. We had to relieve the dress from both cheeks. It was painful because the sore everything was sealed into the dress. You think that was bad? We had to remove the slip. You think that was really bad? Oh, that stockings was the worst because it's fine and it's meshed in there. So we had to pull it apart. After the stockings was finished, here goes the underwear. We were in the hallelujah mode. Come on, don't look so at me. There was blood running down my legs. Right? But when I came here, she told me all the things that had happened in Guyana. I don't even know what happened because I didn't do anything to deserve what she did to me. It's a new country and this is whatever. She threw me out the house many times for no reason. One time she hit me so hard, she pelted me with something in my head. I don't know what happened. I started running, holding my head. Running and holding my head. So she took me to the doctor. And I knew right away that if I told the doctor the truth, they should have been gone too, but they would have taken my brothers. I don't know why I'm protecting them. But I told him I was under the table. I got up and hit my head. You know, it's so much had happened. I decided, I slept in what's that park? Central Park? On a bench. My friend took me in. Her guy tried to rape me. He paid her a case of beer, just attacked me in my sleep. All right? At this point, I said, what's the use? So you know what I did? I started giving my clothes away to my friends. And they took my things. They didn't even realize. They didn't even have a clue. I was about to go and do what? Exactly. So at that time, I lived in Bed-Stuy, do or die. At that time, it was Bed-Stuy, do or die. I had one token left to my name, and I walked through that park. And while walking through the park on Bedford up there's nothing pretty down there. All the trees look dead, even though they have green leaves on them. And that morning, at 6 o'clock, could be 6:30, I was walking through that park. And I saw the greenest of tree. I never seen a tree so green in my life. But you know my Heavenly Father? He knows that I like to decorate. So he painted that tree for me. And I looked and I saw the bluest of sky. I saw the whitest of cloud. And I said, wow, that's such a pretty picture. The plan is for me to get to the subway, put my token in there, walk to the very end of the platform where the train is just about to come in so that it can run my whole body over. I had that mindset, okay? And I'm going and I'm looking at that pretty picture, so my feet started to slow down. And then I said, all I need is a blackbird in the midst of that. It will be the perfect picture, and here comes the blackbird. And then I heard, why don't you ask for help? And I said, God, help me. So when I took that token and I got on the train, I didn't get under it, I got on it. But that's not all. That's not all. I'm winding down. That's not all. I married into an abusive relationship. With that relationship, I get a beating for breakfast, dinner, plus snacks. Almost got my shoulder dislocated. Okay? At one point, I had bleach thrown all over me till I felt like my breath was coming out of my body. I'm trying to break this down as fast as I can. I wanted to kill him so badly one day. I made the most beautiful dinner he liked. And then I laced it with poison because I was going to take him out. The licks was too much and I couldn't go anywhere. He told me that I'm no good. He looked at a 5'6" and tell me I was a size 18 wide. He told me that nobody would want me. He told me that whatever I have down here can't hold him. He said a lot of things to me that I believed, so I wanted to take him out. But he didn't eat it. He left. You know, it's so much more. But let me tell you something. I went to a women's retreat, and they were talking about forgiveness. So I looked around and I saw all these ladies crying, and I wouldn't cry. I don't know why. And my girlfriend, we went back to the room and she said, "Why are you not crying? Don't you have something to cry about? No? Don't you have somebody to call?" So I started to think about it. So I picked up the phone and I called my ex-husband. I said, "Where are you?" "I'm at church." I said, "Can you find a room somewhere that I can talk to you? I need to talk to you." So he says, "Go ahead." And this was the Holy Spirit leading me, you know. I said, "I'm at a forgiveness seminar, and I just want to say something to you. You have done me wrong." And the Spirit told me not to itemize the things that he has done to me. It was a lot. So I said, "You have done me wrong. I didn't do anything to you. Oh, by the way, I forgot. He even put a loaded gun to my head and raped me. I called the cops. You know what the cops said? Your husband can't rape you." And that was in the 80s. But thank God the laws have changed from then. And when I was on the phone with him, and I'm telling him about, I'm at this retreat and you have done things. I never did anything to you. I don't know what you're talking about. I knew he was going to say that. And then I got vexed with the Holy Spirit. I said, "Why did you make me do that?" Because I know that he was going to say that, and now I'm left holding the bag again. And then the Spirit said to me, "Well, Christine, even if you did him one thing," and then I started thinking about the one thing. "Even if you did him the one thing, you apologize for that." So I said, "You know what? If I have caused you any pain or hurt in our marriage, I am sorry." You know how hard that was for me to say? Do you know what happened after that? He said, I never even heard him call me that name. From the first time we met, that's the only time he called me that name. "Chris?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I know I have done you a lot of evil, and I am sorry." When he said that, I was sitting on an armchair, and I started crying, and I felt like something was happening. I didn't know what was happening. I felt like it was coming up, and I find myself like I was floating. And I called my girlfriend and said, "What is happening?" She said, "You just released the ugly gorilla that was sitting on your back." And I started crying, and he couldn't take it anymore. He said, "Okay, Chris, I gotta go. I'm sorry, I gotta go." And he left. That was relief for me. And I came to an organization for real women, international, that helped me, that made me as bold as I am today. But I still had some stuff hanging on, my past. So a couple weeks ago, about a month ago almost, I did a videotape, but nobody could hear the videotape. So I realized that God didn't want me to put anything on the video. That's a chicken way out. You know what he wanted me to do? He wanted me to write. He wanted me to write. And I started to write, "Dear abuser." And I started with Mr. Apollo. I don't know if he's alive or dead, but I forgive him in the name of Jesus. And I exhale. I felt good. And I continue on to Aunt Abuser. She's alive. I blow up her spot. You can ask me about that after. She knows what she did. But I wrote in the letter, "To you, I forgive you and I relieve you." And I exhale. I exhale on every one of them. And I'm telling you right now, I am free. I am free. I am free. And I'm telling you this because you're sitting there and you're being abused. You know who you are. You can be free too. You don't have to sit and take it. You don't. You don't have to sit and take it. It's open now. It's not a closed box anymore. It's plenty of us willing to come and fight your battle with you and bring you out. So if you're sitting here, just talk to any one of us, and we will find help for you. And to the abusers who are sitting here, I pray that you see our pain. You see what you have done. You left us wounded. You left scars. But we are shattered but not broken. We stand strong. So you have to answer to God.
Wow, you guys are awesome. I had a list of questions and questions that I had in my head, and your bravery, your strength is inspiring, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to share with us. Before we move on to the rest of the panel, we have a quick video that we want to show. We had all females here sharing today, but we want to let you know that sexual abuse does not only happen towards little girls, towards women, it also happens towards men. And so we have a quick video that we would like to show you, and then the professional panel will come on.
A landmark Oprah show event. Your husband's son's brother. A landmark Oprah show event. Your husband's son's brothers.
How many of you were abused by more than one?
200 men courageously stand together to say they were all molested.
I cry every day inside knowing what could have been.
With special guest Tyler Perry. The show that opened the floodgates for millions of men. Next.
There are 200 men standing in our studio audience right now. Each one is holding a picture of themselves at the age when they say they were first sexually abused. These courageous men are standing together to lift the veil of shame today, because what happened to them as young boys has profoundly affected who they have become as men.
I'm a husband.
I'm a son.
I'm a boyfriend.
I'm a grandfather of 7.
I work for child welfare.
I work for the federal government.
The sexual abuse started when I was 4.
sexually assaulted at 16.
I was raped at the age of 14.
I was 6.
I was 12.
I was 7. I was sexually abused my entire childhood until I was 18.
The topic is taboo, surrounded by stigma and shame. It's a silent and devastating epidemic with numbers that are really staggering. It's estimated that 1 in every 6 men has been molested as a child. 1 out of 6.
I was molested by a member of my extended family.
I was molested by a family member.
By my landlord.
By several priests.
It was a neighbor.
It was a doctor.
It was my scoutmaster.
It was an award-winning teacher.
I was molested by my father.
Statistics show that 90% of child molesters target children they know. And the horrific side effects of childhood sexual abuse can last a lifetime.
Those men are at greater risk for many emotional problems, including depression, anxiety, problems in relationships with intimacy, problems with sexual dysfunction, problems with sexual orientation confusion, and 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 increased risk for suicide as well. The shame that they feel is immense, and it really totally blocks their ability to talk about it, and they wind up keeping it a secret.
My dad did stuff to me when I was 8. And, I thought he must be right. I must have wanted it. And then I grew up. And I thought every kid wanted it. Getting caught was the best thing.
Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the professional panel. So I'm going to invite our next facilitator forward, Sister Richards.
As they leave the stage, let's give them another hand. And we actually should give them a standing ovation. To be able to stand here and tell your story with such courage and clarity, and still know that there is a God who loves and cares. Our respect and admiration for these women. Thank you very much. So we have to put things into context, and we're going to invite 3 professionals from different areas on the stage. We're going to be as real as possible. The conversation for this topic is long overdue in our churches. We should have been having this conversation decades ago. But now that we're having it, we're going to have it and we're going to do it well. So I'm going to invite to the stage Dr. Sonia Smith, who's a clinician. She has a private practice. She's going to come to the stage, has dealt with numerous cases. I'm going to invite Pastor Baldwin Barnes, father, husband, pastor, also representing Northeastern Conference Family Ministries. I'm going to invite Sister Barbara Hall, who is in charge of risk management for Northeastern Conference. Dr. Barnes, sit in the middle. I wanted him to sit in the middle to balance, yes. So I'm going to ask each one of you to take a mic, since we have enough mics. So the topic is sexual abuse. First, let's start by defining sexual abuse. Because oftentimes the feeling is, well, if there's no penetration, then there's not sexual abuse, right? So let's start by that. Let's define sexual abuse.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just breathing. I'm breathing, and I thank those 4 women for sharing. I honor you. I applaud you. I applaud you. Sexual abuse. Clinically, it talks about, and break it down, any sexual advancement act towards anyone, men, women, children, without their consent. Once they experience it as bridging that privacy about who they are and what, about their own bodies, it's without the consent. It's interesting. It's interesting. Listen, we all have our own stories. And as I talk to you, I have my own story, which is not what I'm about here today. But I do have the experience, and I had reaction to the stories that was told. So I'll try to be as real as I can be, and as simple, and not with all the big flounces, but to just let you know. We're sitting in church, and even as we say, Norca says, what is sexual abuse? Simply, any sexual advances or act towards any one of us, any one of you, without your consent. Whether you be married, whether you're in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, if you're a child and your little girlfriend and your little boyfriends come up to you and you feel, you perceive, you experience it, that's your experience, that it was not consented. You didn't give them that consent. Simply put, sexual abuse.
I don't know if Sister Hall, Pastor Barnes, would you like to add to that?
I think the doctor did an excellent job, because that's how in risk management, two terms, unwanted, unwelcome. Yeah. Unwanted and unwelcome.
And I'd add that children have no power to give a cent. Sonia said, advances without consent. A child is not able to give consent, and therefore any sexual contact with a child is abusive.
Let me ask this question. What about pornography? Because we've heard cases of children that have been exposed to pornography by adults. It could be part of a grooming process, but it could also be just exposing children to pornography. Could this fall in the ranks of sexual abuse?
Yes. Want to say more?
No. Pornography, again, when you think about it, you are, breaking the protection that this child is supposed to be having, and you are showing them without their consent, because a lot of times that's how you talk about grooming. A lot of adults and adolescents, young men do that, young women do that to the child also. Show them flashes of their, genitals and all of that stuff. Internet, you send a lot of internet to each other, and it has the sexual tones to it. It is without consent. And you are breaching, it's the actual word I'm looking for, breaching that area of quote unquote protection that a child is supposed to be growing up with. So yes, pornography.
You want to add something else?
Yeah, let me add the fact that in a positive sense, we are sexual beings. All of us, we're sexual beings. And the sexual energy is part of the life force. And when any interaction, whether verbal, physical, whatever, interrupts a person's freedom to be just who they are, that's abusive. And anytime you interrupt someone's freedom to be who God gave them the freedom to be, then you're being abusive.
Wow, love that, love that. Yeah. So the theme of the conference centers itself within two settings, the Black community and the church, right? So first of all, I wanted to start debunking the myth that the two things are separate entities. The church is not only part of the community, the church is the community, right? We always talk about we have to go to the community. We live in the community, so we are in the community. When we come to church, we bring ourselves
to the church. We bring the community to the church. So the question is, what are some misconceptions that exist in our cultures? And we heard from the different stories here and our communities about sexual abuse. I would like each one of you to pick one misconception that you've heard over time and address it, that come from culture or from community and the way sexual abuse is viewed.
The most common one that folks engage in is blaming. It's your fault. It is your fault. And the pain that that brings to the person who has experienced the abuse, and to hear that it is your fault, you are blamed for it. And with that, there is no empathy and compassion that leaves the abused person being re-abused. So we have that double whammy that they are growing up with, you know, if we think about the children. Abused first by the actual abuser, and then abused again by people who blame them and say it's your fault. You were the one. You brought this on yourself. No compassion. What are they to do?
And another myth that I can think of is that it doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen in the church. You heard from the individuals today, the ladies today, and you recognize that they were all members of the church. But we may still think, not in our church, that was then, but not today. But working with Adventist risk management, and when we look through the case files, we can see that it happens here. For the past 20 years, the Adventist Church has paid out over $30 million because of sexual abuse in the church. I know that may not seem like a lot compared to other denominations, but that's $30 million that could be used for other things. And these are just the reported cases. There are many, because you've heard the story this evening. Okay, and no one wants to speak. No one wants to tell. If it's reported to you in the church, you are not going to tell. You're not going to report it, because it's a good elder. He's a good deacon. He's a good elder. He's a good pastor, a good deaconess. But yes, it happens even in our church, even today.
When Barbara says it happens in our church, it sounds as if she's talking about the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So I'd like to be more specific. What churches do you go to? It happens in that church. It happens in all churches. So I'd like to acknowledge all of you who are present for allowing this conversation. Because according to the book that we all cherish, everything that we need to deal with, we need to bring it to the light. And when we bring it to the light will transform. So when we don't have the conversations, as some of the ladies mentioned, when we lose our voice and we see something or know something and don't say anything, we are keeping the status quo. But when we bring it to the light and talk about it, then transformation can take place. So the situation we're talking about sounds like an individual thing, like I was abused or she was abused, that sort of thing. When we maintain the idea that Barbara mentioned, that it doesn't happen here and we can't talk about certain things here. I mean, we're a church, we're spiritual people, we're going to heaven, we're not supposed to talk about that. When we do it that way, then we as a community, as a church, as a community, as a corporate body, then we are doing the abusing. So you say, well, I didn't do the abuse, but we did the abuse when we don't talk about it, when we don't allow for the correction, the transformation to take place.
Yes, yes.
Barbara, you wanted to say something? You want to add something to that, Barbara? No? Okay. So I want to bring in the aspect of laws. We live in a country where there are laws and where people are mandated to report. But oftentimes people feel that in the church we're not mandated. That's for the people out there. Are we mandated to report, Sister Hall?
Actually, yes. We are all mandated to report. As a matter of fact, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has gone as far as they have policies regarding what should happen. And when we don't go by our policies, our written policies, it's even worse. Because then the books are open and this is what should happen. Hence, if we were going to be fined $5,000, let's say $1 million, because we did not follow our own policy, then usually they fine doubles, triples, stuff like that. So yes, we are mandated to report sexual abuse.
So what I'm hearing from you is that we have policies and there are protocols in place. Why is it that we're not following these? I'm throwing you in the hot water, but we want to know what, Pastor, help us out. Why are we following these?
You know what? I'm going to let Pastor answer that because I know we send the policies to the church. Pastor, why isn't it that we're not following these policies? Pastor Barnes?
There are several ways I can answer. I guess the first one is in a more general way about who we are as human beings. Who we are as human beings, both individually as well as corporately, is that we are attached to looking good. We certainly don't want our name to be spread across the front pages of the paper or to be reported on TV that so-and-so church or so-and-so pastor or leader or whatever was involved in, sexual abuse or whatever behavior that we're talking about. And so some of us as leaders try to cover stuff up for that general reason. And then there may be more specific individual reasons that you are covering up stuff, especially if you're the one that might have been involved, right? So we would rather hide, and that hiding started very early in the garden. We've been hiding ever since. We don't want to fess up. And anybody who knows how to deal with bad publicity, they will tell you the best thing to do is to fess up quick and tell everything, say it all, get it all out. And the sooner you deal with it, the better. And the longer you try to cover it up, whether it's individually or corporately, the worse the situation gets.
However, let me add to that, Pastor. Culturally and socially, that's not what we are trained.
Exactly.
But legally, we are held, each and every one of us is held responsible if you even suspect. It is not our business to know the truth and the veracity of it, whether the child lied or the child didn't lie, or the wife lied or the wife didn't lie. Once we feel and once we suspect anything like abuse is happening, we ought to speak it out. So, but we are trained that if we do speak it out, then we become now, sometimes it comes back at us.
Right.
It comes back at us, and so we'd rather not get involved in it. I've seen that so many times. The neighbor knows and saw some stuff happening to the child, or the school teacher, and you didn't. Professionally, we are held accountable.
Right.
I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
Right.
If I see and suspect and I don't say something, even though the family that I'm working with, they're going to be angry with me or they're not going to like me and come back again, it is my responsibility lawfully to report. Likewise in the church. Pathfinder Club,
pastors, everybody.
Yes, every one of us, but we prefer not to take the responsibility when legally we could be held accountable.
You know, it's interesting that you say even if we suspect.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes it's better that we err on that side and we were
Exactly.
wrong than to allow things to go
Yes.
on and then destroy
Yes.
lives further on.
It happens.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to point that out, that even if we suspect, we're not required to investigate.
No.
Right.
We're not required to investigate. And if we say something, it can be anonymous. There are numbers to call, 800 numbers to call, anonymous reporting, and let the professionals do the investigation.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we would prefer if you not do the investigation.
Yeah.
You really should not, unless
Right.
you're trained. I wouldn't conduct an investigation. I'm not trained.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I should, if I suspect abuse, I should report abuse and allow it to be investigated.
Amen. Amen.
By law, can parents be held responsible for the sexual abuse of their children?
Let me
This
answer
is a
that.
tough question, but
Yeah.
we need to sit on this for a while. We're not blaming parents, but are they held responsible?
Parents are held responsible. I used to work in agencies where we were connected with ACS. And the child abuse is because the parent did not protect the child, whether through supervision, most times it's through supervision, or lack thereof, and maltreatment, etc. And we would call in a case because it was the uncle or some friend they allowed in the home. Duh. And the child was abused. The parent, the case was called in on them, and the case would be against the parent.
Wow.
Not just the uncle or the boyfriend who came into the home. That's another piece of it. But when it comes to child abuse, it is the parent who's held accountable.
Now, we have beautiful large structures and churches. I am in a beautiful one, the Living Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is certainly a beautiful one. I always say that there are crevices and holes in all these large, even the small ones too. And sometimes you see children and young people just, you know.
Oh, yeah.
What is the recommendation? What should parents do? You come to church, you bring your young ones, and you say, oh, they're in the I've had parents say, they're in the building. They're somewhere, they're in the building. Help me now. Do parents need to be more vigilant, or what needs to occur?
Okay, you have said it.
Yes.
We've all said it. Yes, parents need to be vigilant. Parents need to be vigilant. I'm going to go a step further, though. I know we know that a lot of times our church is used as a babysitter.
Yes.
You have
agency,
sat in church,
yes.
parents pass by, they sit in the car, and they tell their child to go in. And they just tell their child to go in. And we have a duty to protect those little ones once they enter our building. I'm not letting parents off the hook, but we have a duty to protect them. We have a duty to supervise. There are so many nooks and crevices in most of our churches, and most of our adults do not know where some of these places lead. But I'm sure you ask your young people, they'll tell you where every nooks and crevices and where everything runs. And sometimes we come to church and we sit here, but believe it or not, our deacons are supposed to be a little more vigilant. There needs to be some type of supervision. They need to be more vigilant going through those areas. Bathrooms, just sending your children to the bathroom. You have no idea who's in the bathroom. Deacon and deaconesses should be going in and out of the bathroom ever so often. I know they're here to hear the service also, and that's why schedules need to be maintained.
Right.
I see Pastor need to talk, so I'm going to give you an
I don't
opportunity.
need to talk, I just need to nod on what you're saying. Barbara has said it all. We as leaders need to make sure that we put in place systems that would keep everybody safe in the building. It's our responsibility. is part of our risk management liability mitigation process. So we have to put in place systems, as Barbara said, schedules of people in place who are monitoring and supervising the entire building to make sure that everybody is safe, especially our children.
And back again on the social and the cultural level, every one of us, beyond, as we said, beyond the parent and the deacons, what we also need to know and to accept in our churches, this one of the reasons why I decided to be here, is to have a voice, to speak up, so that others who don't speak up, who need to hear, will hear. So I'm not going to be chastising, but I just need to let you know that we in church needs to understand that when we hear these things, that we have to believe, accept it, and then work, put some actions in place to protect our children, safety, protection of our children.
We're going to have question and answers afterwards. We're going to open up for question and answers. So just hold that for me. There is something very important here. In the stories that these courageous ladies shared, there were instances of grooming, but there were also instances where it was just blatant. Yeah. It happened. I think that grooming is very subtle, right? And grooming can take place easily in communities and in a congregation because you're living with these people, and as one of the ladies shared, auntie, uncle. So, everybody seems to be of one big family. Talk to us a little bit about that process of grooming, because sometimes you're like, but there is a good church member, it's so and so. Talk to us about, sometimes the children don't want to go with the person, and we're like, no, go, it's uncle so or auntie so. Talk to us a little bit about that process of grooming. Coming from what Dr. Smith shared, that when the person says it happened, we have to believe. You want to share a little bit about grooming?
It's, as you rightly say, Nova, it can be quite subtle at times. Just making up and playing up, I say playing up to the child or playing up to the young person about how nice they are, and I can show you this and I can show you that. I remember even a little bit about myself, where this man in the church, I was in a Catholic church at the time, and it was a priest, and he would favor you. They do that a lot. They make you a favorite, make you a, like their little pet. And
special.
Yes, very special, and you like that. So when they begin to do anything that is off-key, you don't think it's them, you think it's you. And that's why you take the blame and you say, ooh, I will be silent. And that's a very, very subtle way that they do it. And family members do it as well. They bring extra candy or extra clothes or a pretty pocketbook or something that can bring you in, draw you in, steal your confidence, steal your trust in them, and before they begin to do their act. And so even as parents, we need to be very watchful and see what's happening around.
So on the back end of grooming, there's also the silencing of the voices, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
How can parents help their children to develop trust in their voices, to be more self-aware, to be able to share? Because a lot of times it seems that family is silencing you, or you're silencing yourself because you're afraid of the repercussions. What can we do to help develop the voices of our children?
Well, I think we have to begin transforming culture. As one of the ladies who said that in culture it was children ought to be seen and not heard. So we now being exposed to what's happening with our children, recognizing that our children are human beings just as we are. They are smaller than we are, but we've been given a responsibility to train them up to be healthy, whole, and complete human beings. Therefore, we allow them to have a voice from the very beginning, because God intended for them to have a voice even as a babbling little child without full language. God considers them to have a voice. So let us allow them to express themselves and let them know that it's safe to tell mommy and daddy any and everything. And we actually train them not to ever have, secrets from mommy and daddy from other people. That if that's a warning sign. If someone tries to tell you not to tell mommy and daddy, that is exactly the time for you to tell mommy and daddy. So it's a matter of creating a relationship with them where they are free to express themselves, and then we train them how to recognize and to talk about what's going on with them.
Yes, it's those family times. And that's what we're missing a lot of now. We're also busy that we don't get around the dinner table and just talk about our day. What happened today? What happened in school? What happened at church? Anything different? And stuff like that. Just spending time with and listening for what they're not saying. Listen, look, observe. Children who are abused, they exhibit certain type of behavior. And these are what we need to know, the warning signs. And we have to be observant and talk and allow them to allow our kids to talk. Like they said, children should be seen and should be heard. Well, today, the children are going to be heard. And in this house, you have a voice. We want to hear everything you have to say. And like Pastor said, there is no secret in this house. We talk about everything.
This is educational and informative but also educational at the same time, because I'm thinking, if you grew up as a mom, and you were shut down, but every time you have to say something, you were quieted. Now you have kids. You would have trained them and be with them and teach them in the way that you were, unless you found a place to find out, to learn, to educate yourself that there's a different style of parenting. A different style of parenting, underlying it is safety and protection for my child. So while I may have been shut down, and now others are saying, oh, you must listen to your child and let them speak. You were trained. So now you have to untrain or unlearn ways so that you can then accommodate encouraging the child to have a voice. Because you still didn't get your voice yet, sometimes as an adult. And it's being asked of you, let them have a voice. You don't know what to do with them. If they come to you and they begin to speak out, we say that they're rude. In this country, I learned the word is assertive. If my child is coming to speak up, they are being assertive. But if I didn't know how to train them to put it in a way that is respectful and to put it in a way that I can really understand them, I still would be shutting them down rather than letting them have a voice.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. I want to shift gears here. I was going to go to something, but in the interest of time, let's just hear it from you. Marriage. Can there be rape, sexual abuse in a marriage? We heard it before. We want to hear it from you now. Is this possible?
Yes. Yes, the first question you asked was, what is abuse? What's a sexual abuse? And we all said it's unwanted and it's unwelcome, and it's without consent. A wife, a spouse, not just a wife, a husband, there are times when they can say no. And if you force yourself, it's rape.
Thank you. Now, we're moving from the community to the church. The typical reactions, and you mentioned a lot of this before, whenever sexual abuse occurs or whenever someone shares, is that we either silence the victim, we shame the victim, we say it's your fault, it can't be his fault or her fault. We find the need as a church to choose sides. The church is split because some people are with the other one. And we definitely do not deal or confront with the issue. Now, Pastor, you're going to help me here. I want to explore why we have these behaviors. Is it our theology? We talked about culture before, But is it just culture? Is it also part of our theology? Where does this come from?
You mean the
The
silencing,
silence
shaming?
and the shaming, the splitting, the not dealing with the issue in church?
Not dealing with the issue in church, I guess, is probably the easiest for me to deal with. The whole conversation about human sexuality is basically taboo. And it's amazing that it is in the church. I can understand how it might be because of culture outside of the church, but we say that we are the people of the book, and yet one of the chief characteristics in terms of who we are as human beings, we want to say is taboo. Well, this is a very, very clever trick by the devil. The same way the abuser tries to silence, the victim, is the same way that the devil is trying to keep us as a corporate body from having the conversation about sexuality. When I was in seminary, one of the books that we had to read was by one of our professors. His name was Charles Witcherby, and the title of the book was God Invented Sex. God invented sex. Sex is holy and sacred. It's about life. God invented life. God invented all of that, and he wants us to have conversations for it. The reason we come to church on the seventh day is to celebrate life. Sexuality, human sexuality is about life, and so it ought to be something that we celebrate, is something that is sacred, is God-given. And so it is the devil's intent to keep us from having that conversation that would enhance and encourage life. He wants to make it all about, control and domination and fear and hurt and pain and abuse in general. And I think that's where we are with the conversation.
I'm glad you asked, Pastor. I'm glad you specifically directed that question to Pastor, because I wanted to hear his response. I have a situation going on right now in a church that will remain nameless in a state that is nameless. Northeastern Conference covers quite a few states, so you probably won't guess which church or in which state. And basically the risk manager wrote a letter, handwrite a letter. I didn't even know people handwrite letters these days, but it was a handwritten letter and mailed to me, confidential. And the risk manager is asserting that there's a situation in the church that involves a 14-year-old and one of the elder. The risk manager reported it to the pastor. The pastor said, no, we're not going to report it. We're not going to say anything because we don't want to get the church name out there. We don't want to disgrace the church. The elder is still serving as an elder. What should I do? You know what I did? I said, you report it. But of course the person doesn't want, because they said it's a prominent person in the church and it's going to divide the church. So since I did contact them and tell them that they should report, and they said they're not going to do it. They're not going to go against the pastor and the elders. So I shoot it on to the administration. And I did send it as a claim to Adventist Risk Management. It wasn't an official claim, but we have what we call an alert that this is happening, and there may be a potential claim later on, because the parents could file something later on. There was another case that I guess I could say where, because it was in Connecticut, because it was in the newspaper. And that was the only time the church found out about it. It was the Seventh-day Adventist church.
Wow.
Not until it was disclosed in the newspaper and the person took a plea bargain, but the person was coming to church all this time, participating, molesting in the church, molesting on the outside, got prosecuted, and when the person was being sentenced and it came out in the newspaper, that's when the church found out about it.
Wow.
And it was in the church with a member in the church. But the parents filed it on the outside with the authorities on the outside and kept it in a legal area. Now, we are watching to see if there will be a lawsuit. This was just 2 months ago, it was in the paper. So we're waiting to see if there'll be a lawsuit against the church because it was never reported to the church. So when we said not in our church, it happens in our church.
Right.
How many of you agree with me that this needs to stop? We need to put an end to it. And those of us that are here seated today, we're empowered to know that an end has to come. There's been an increase on child abuse. I was listening to the North American Division had an abuse conference, very good conference. And the lawyers said there that there's a great increase of child abuse. What are some recommendations? Because oftentimes we think, oh, they're playing, they're kids, they're exploring. What are your suggestions, recommendations for those of us who are parents, those of us who have children, don't have children, work with children? What do we need to be looking out for? What do we need to do?
Actually, that's exactly what the statistics have shown, especially in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that it's increasing, especially in our schools and our daycare, Sabbath school, and it mainly happens when the kids are going to the bathroom. So therefore, the recommendation, never send two kids to the bathroom. Never send two kids to the bathroom without an adult being present. There are several recommendations that has been given to what we need to, and that's why I was talking about being vigilant when they come to church, and that's why we need people. Supervision is the main problem, and that's why we need individuals to patrol our churches while we are in worship.
Amen.
We're talking about trip. Pathfinders go on a lot of overnight trip and stuff like that. Now the adventurers are starting to go on overnight trip. Adventurers didn't used to, but now we're seeing the younger ones going on overnight trip. And we're seeing that happening also. So supervision is the most important thing where this is concerned. And parents need to watch their kids. And parents, you need to be with your kids. You need to be with your kids.
Amen.
That's right. I just add one other thing to it because it starts with the head. And I've often said that if I'm not pointing any finger, Pastor Barnes is a good friend of mine, you know. But the pastors in the churches, in our churches, I'm going to bring it home to us. It's out there in the first day churches the same way. But in our churches, we are God's remnant special people. Our pastors need to hold all of this. That's their responsibility as preaching the word. If when a member comes and say X, Y, and Z, you got to listen and believe it and explore it or take a look into it. But once you begin to sweep it under the rug, it's no, those children, there are steps and corners and bathroom and everything. Maybe invest in some monies to put, I don't know, cameras, because we are in that age now. Put a camera somewhere, put a camera there as part of protection and the safety, you know. But I want to stress that the pastors, from my experience, there are two cases that I have. Well, one is current, one is past. And it was from Adventist circles, where it happened in the church. And the pastor and the elders and the people, you know, who ought to be taking the steps to protect the church, the children in the church. Sweep it under the rug, cover it up. Of course, it made me mad, you know. But I'm saying again, it goes from the top. So we got to have pastors who believe in this thing, along with the members and the parents, to be accountable for the safety of our children.
Amen. I'd like to encourage all of you to recognize that, at least here in the Northeastern Conference, all of our pastors have ongoing training in service in all of these areas, including sexual abuse. And so what Dr. Smith is mentioning, you can be sure that our pastors are prepared to take on the responsibility of the safety of all of our members and attendees at our churches and especially our children.
What I think is concerning is that when you sweep an issue like this under the rug, it doesn't stop it. And usually this is not the first either. If you look at the cycle of abuse, it happened before, you just caught up with it maybe in the middle, and so it behooves us to really report and put stops to these
And
things.
end it.
Yeah.
And end it.
End it.
Exactly, and end
Exactly.
it. And if we're getting the training, then we need to apply, and I think that's part of the issue. Maybe we're not seeing it as dangerous or as important. It needs to be a priority. So what is the statute of limitation for reporting abuse in the state of New York? Because what if someone comes to me and says, which happens a lot, I was abused by X person decades ago. Is there a statute of limitation in the state of New York?
I think it. Prosecution. I think I can't
Okay.
recall because
Okay.
having worked
Right.
in child welfare, I can't
Right.
recall. But there is something to do with the age of the child, maybe after 18 or something. I can't recall, but I know that there is something along the no.
Okay.
Age of majority plus
plus
7.
Okay, thank you for that. Age of majority. No, if a victim shares with us that they have been abused, what should we say, what should we not say? And I'm going to leave this for the panel, and then we're going to open it just for 3 questions. Somebody comes up and said, I came to this conference, they were talking this stuff. I was abused. What should we say and what should we not say? Because 9 out of 10, we always say the wrong thing, right? So what should we not say? What should we say?
My first response, because just in having worked so much with different abuse and so on, that I have learned, one of my first response is to empathize with that person. Again, it's not my business to find out, are you telling me the truth or not? If you tell me that you were abused, whether you're an adult or whether you're a child, I am to empathize. I'm so sorry that you had to experience something as bad as this or traumatic as it. And so the words that we say, see, we are not trained because we don't conversate about this issue of sexual abuse or abuse. So we don't know the words. So when they come to us, oh, child, pray about it. The Lord will take care of it.
And that's what we're not supposed to say.
Not supposed to say.
That's exactly what we're not supposed to say.
Because somebody comes and tells you, and they disclose to you, it had to have taken a lot from them to open up. There is pain, there is shame, there is sometimes anger for the loss of whatever it is.
Right.
So that's my first, I have learned, thank God, over time. Learn to be empathetic. Learn to be empathetic, not sympathetic. I'm so sorry for you.
No.
That's not what they want to hear.
That's right.
They want to know that you heard what my pain is.
Yeah, acknowledged. Acknowledge that it.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes. Anything else? Oh.
Well, I certainly, if I'm just working on one. You tell me that, and I would want to know, is there anyone else that you can talk to because you want to develop a support system somewhere? Because you, me, I can't hear it all and do it all, so you want to have some safe space. Is there anyone in your circle? And maybe there is none. That's why they came to me. That's why they came to you. So we trust, and I would say, besides being empathetic and showing the compassion about it, it's really looking for that other place, because you can't do it all, and you have to decide who else needs to be aware of this.
Right.
Because if you have to file a report, now that they have laid it on you, I remember asking a little boy one time, what do you want me to do with this? I was kind of scared, because he has given me, in confidence, something. But I know what had happened to him. What do you want me to do? And what he wanted me to do at that time is to help him tell his parent.
Right, because
help him tell his parent.
Yeah, because one of the things that we really shouldn't promise, because we're not trained, we are not the trained counselor or anything, we cannot promise that it's what you're saying is will remain between both of us. You're not going to tell everyone else, but what you're going to promise is that we are going to get the help that you need. So you're not promising that, okay, whatever you're saying to me, okay, it's just between both of us. Can't be between both of us. Because if someone come to you, they're seeking help. And since I'm not trained to give the help, because if I try to render assistance, I may actually do more damage, because I'm pretty sure our psychologists can tell us that those who are trained know exactly how to assist. So what we do want to promise is that together I'm not promised any confidentiality between both of us. We will try to get assistance for you.
Well, let me say that your being present here in this conversation prepares you more how to interact. This conversation, being involved in it, allows you to hear someone's sharing in a different way than you would have before the conversation.
Right.
So before even knowing what to say, there is knowing who to be in the conversation with someone who's sharing with you. And who to be is to be at peace between you and God, so that you recognize that you are a tool in the Master's hand to minister to someone else.
Right.
What I mean by that is when someone is sharing their experience with you, you are not there to overreact in your own person. Oh my God, what did you say? You know, that doesn't help anybody. So when you're at peace and you're calm and everything is okay, and you're not trying to be the one to make things, fix things, or make things right for the person, then you can just be open to receive. So you receive from them, as both Sonia and Barbara were saying, you acknowledge, you affirm, you move to empathy, you validate the feelings, whatever feelings that they're shared with you, you validate feelings. All feelings are valid.
That's right.
So you don't make any judgment on anything that happens. And as Barbara said, you support them if you can in terms of finding the help that they need.
Beautiful. It's so important that our churches become safe places and spaces. There's some ladies around in pink. They're the women from For Real Women International. We've had a lot of experience with cases like this. If you want to share and just have someone listen to you and honor your feelings, you can step to any of these women after the event. But now we want to open up for 3 questions. I'm going to start with Dr. Usher. She had a hand up. There's a lady here, and there's someone way in the back, and there's one gentleman. So 4. We have our 4. So let's start over here with Dr. Usher, all the way over here. The mic is coming. And we ask you to please ask questions. Don't make long comments. Just ask the question. You have the experts here that are willing to answer.
I am hearing from the risk management leader that it is important for our leaders of the church to take care of our younger ones. All right, it is mandated in the schools and so forth that anyone who's leading in the school and so forth or in the school should have background check. What about the church? I heard also the pastor said that the pastors, they have ongoing workshops and all of this and so forth. But every 2 years or every year in our churches, we have election of leaders. And we elect different leaders every year. And I haven't seen that these leaders go through the procedure to become, fingerprinted and background checks and all of that. And what we heard this afternoon from the 4 panelists, that most of these things occur in the church, because sexual abuse actually is from people who the younger ones know. It's not really strangers.
Okay. Great question. What's the process? What's the background check, the follow-up?
Excellent. In the church, all of our volunteers, all of our leaders are required to
Verified volunteer.
yes. We're required to go through the training and to do the background check so that they can be approved to interact as volunteers with our children.
So this is, I have to pitch in here. Because does this really happen?
Do the churches know that they ought to be doing this? Do our local churches? Because I remember in one of my church, we had volunteers came in from the community.
Okay.
I'm glad the risk management person is here.
I am so glad you asked that question, because I'm just going to throw it out here. How many people have ever heard of Shield the Vulnerable? Okay. So the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because a few years ago we all heard about what happened in the Catholic Church, okay? Yeah. So the Seventh-day Adventist Church realized, look, it's happening in our churches, and we thank God that they are just putting the spotlight on the Catholic Church and not on our church, because actually they could have put some spotlight on us too. True. I told you that we spent over $30 million, right? Did I say 30? I meant 300 actually. Sorry.
300,
okay?
300
million. Yes.
300
million, yes. Wow. I said it's 20-year period, not like. Ooh. However, remember the Catholic Church had to sell some of their beautiful edifices and stuff like that.
Able to pay.
We haven't had to do that. Yes. Thank God we have our own insurance company. So we have Adventist Risk Management, and they have put in place a training program. We think of it just as the background check, but it actually has a training module in it. First, you have to go through the entire training. It's no longer Shield the Vulnerable. Shield the Vulnerable was not robust enough. So in last year, they signed the contract with a new company called Verified Volunteer. Actually, when North American Division did that, the entire North American Division is using Verified Volunteer. Before anyone, once you elect someone, before anyone works with our children, first of all, you were saying something about volunteers coming to work. Right. From the community. Before someone can volunteer to work with a child, one of the rules that we have, I told you that we have certain things in place, is that there's a 6-month waiting period.
Wow.
You can't just transfer into my church or get baptized into my church, and within the first 6 months you're elected to work in a youth department.
This is good to know.
It's against our rule.
Excellent.
It's in our policy manual.
Dr. Marks.
Pastor Marks.
But let's clarify our terms. I don't think this church is requiring this. I think the church is recommending this. Because, let me just finish. This is a matter that is very dear to my heart. I was pastoring just outside of Boston when the Boston Archdiocese was blowing up with this, when Cardinal Bernard Law was the Archbishop, who subsequently resigned and got safe haven in the Vatican.
Yes.
The Adventist Church is still providing safe havens.
Yes.
By its inaction. It's not its intention. I've been pastoring 20 years in the North American Division, and this thing is still to become a requirement that is enforced.
Okay.
People are still being elected every year, not every 2 years, because this year, Flatbush is not having an election, but another church is having. People are still being elected every year and are going to serve without fulfilling that so-called requirement. What that means is, it's on paper, it looks good, it makes us feel good, but until we stop the machinery, we are not as serious as we should be.
You know, this is an excellent point.
Honestly speaking, Pastor Marks, I'm going to agree with you. It's a recommendation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Sister
They
Hall,
are not putting enough teeth in it,
Right.
whereas there is any action taken if you don't do it.
right.
And this is
And
really,
that's exactly.
this is scandalous.
Yes, it is.
I agree with you.
2017,
Yeah,
after
exactly.
what we watched happen in the news
Yes.
to all those Catholic men, especially at the hands of priests
Yes.
who got transferred, who got retirement, and the Adventist Church, for all the noise it makes about the distinction between it and Roman Catholicism,
Yes.
is as Catholic as ever
Yes.
on this issue.
Pastor, you know something? Do you know when they voted this at the year-end meeting, the North American Division year-end meeting? In 2003. It was voted.
wow.
That's why I agree with you that it's only a recommendation, because they voted certain policy in the year-end, the 2003 year-end meeting, because this is when everyone comes together in North American Division and they vote all the new policies and they put it in places that will govern all the Adventist church. At the year-end, the 2003 year-end meeting, they voted FB 220, FB 20. And that's the policy, the guidelines for individuals volunteering or working with children.
So
No.
Yeah. Let me ask this question, right? And it ties in with what the person is saying here. So we see that it's a problem having it as a recommendation, right? Because we already see a lot of people falling through the cracks. What do you suggest, Sister Barbara Hall, that we do perhaps on a local basis to try to harness, brace ourselves, as opposed to wait for it to, do you have any recommendations for
I would
us?
recommend that the local conference, it would be at a local conference. I am the first one, I'm an employee of Northeastern Conference. I'm the director for risk management. I'm going to just say that. Our pastors are our employees. They are the one who basically is the CEO of our churches. They are the one who ensure that the rules and the regulations are followed in the churches. The guidelines are that if a person comes to your church, the first 6 months, they cannot work with children. That's just one thing. That's a 6-month rule. And then there's a screening process. No one should be working with a child unless they have gone to verified volunteer, been properly screened, and they have submitted their names to have a background check. The good thing about verified volunteer, I asked you about Shield the Vulnerable, but one of the big thing about verified volunteer is that it's a lot more government agencies. And we don't have to worry about whether we're documented or undocumented. One of the agencies that they don't have any connection with is the Department of Homeland Security. And also for the first year, which Shield the Vulnerable was not doing, they keep running the person name every month. And our names get rerun in the system. But too often, and I'm just going to end right now, is that there are too many people working with our children who have not at least gone through the screening process and have submitted their names for background check. And if one of those people should do anything, the government will pick up our entire policy and will use our policy against us.
Well, clearly the mechanism is there. We have to utilize it, but it is there. There was a question here. Yes.
I have a quick comment and then my question. Pastors are not clinicians. And many times...
Not all, some are.
Not
Some.
all,
Right.
exactly. The majority are not clinicians.
Right.
Now, pastors receive confessions from people, and there is more damage trying to follow the process of the confession than getting a clinician in the congregation or sending the person to get the assistance that the person gets. And I have been spirit stepped on because I was in the seminary. I never got a psychology class in the seminary. I am a clinician. Everything I did in school was clinical. So it affects me to hear things that the pastor is taking care of when the pastor is not, with all my respect, able, available, and trained. He is willing, but he is not able. And this has to stop. My question now is, you were saying that there are policies established in our conference on sexual behavior. Where are they? Because we don't know them. We, the church congregation, don't know where those things are. I didn't even know that existed until Barbara said so. My question number 2, what happened to the abuser in the church? The pastor, the elder? What happened? Do we change them from church to church and the damage is still going all over the place? Or that person is retired, and not only retired, helped, that he will be healed or she will be healed.
So let's deal with her first question. Where can we find these policies?
Okay, your first question, the policies, okay. We don't normally just print the policies and send the policies out. We have workshops. At our annual youth convention, risk management is there, and risk management usually do 4 to 5 workshops. We ensure that our pathfinder, all of your youth leaders, and that's why we encourage you to send your people to workshops to get trained, because this is where they get it. Risk management workshop, we train your risk managers, and your risk managers bring it back to the church. The pastors get it at workers' meeting, and so the pastor should diffuse it, should implement it.
Okay. And the second part of the question is, what are we doing with the offenders? Especially if they're in high places. And we're not laying this on you, Sister Hall.
Okay,
Pastor
okay.
Barnes, everybody can help.
I'm not going to go into the details because there's also a policy about offenders attending church. There's a written policy about offenders attending church. I'm not going to go through the intricacies of it right now because it's after 8. But there are written guidelines and written policies.
Share a little bit
and
of
we
it.
also share. For example, they are supposed to be supervised.
Yes.
They can only come to certain activities. They are told that. They can only come to certain activities. They have to have a chaperone.
Yep.
If they're going to the bathroom, they're not allowed to go to the bathroom by themselves, believe it or not, because there may be little boys in the bathroom. If they accidentally find themselves in an area with a child by themselves, they are to leave that area, and the elders and deacons are supposed to know who they are and should chaperone them. And there is a statement that they also sign before they can attend your church.
Are they sent to counseling?
Oh, this is after their return to church. They have served their time or whatever, and they're on the list and stuff like that. Yes, they would receive the counseling, definitely.
See how powerful
And
this moment is. We're getting educated. Yes, there are policies in place. We are not applying, and we're not holding on to them. We're not aware. But now that we know, this is a different conversation we're having in these church board meetings. There was a question here in the back, and then I'll come back to the gentleman here.
Yes, good evening. So I heard 4 things dealt with here. So we're talking about the child abuse, we're talking about domestic abuse and the church. And one of the things that I didn't hear dealt with is this runaway problem of same-sex experiences, experimentations in the church. And so my question is the church being contributory to this abusive situation? Is the church abusing when they are holding back? Like, for instance, the church is not providing sex education as a curriculum for the church. And so, like the city trying to solve the teenage pregnancy they train the OBGYNs and the doctors and nurses to speak to these young children as they come back for their postpartum. After a year and a half or close to 2 years, they found that the kids were coming back for their postpartum pregnant. And so the subject of dealing with the teenage pregnancy wasn't working. So a group of people with the certain departments in the health department came up with an idea that they call askable parents. Because, you know, parents are not askable. As we all declared that because we weren't trained and stuff like that in matters of sexual or sexuality, that went around the schools and the PTAs and were training people with these subjects, a 6-course workshop in preventing child sex abuse and teenage pregnancy and all these different matters in terms of educating the parents to teach them to teach sexuality and sex issues to be able to explain to the children to prevent this. As a situation that didn't work, they took away temperance from our church. Temperance is not being taught anymore in the churches. There's no more temperance department. And so the kids are involved with sex, dress, substance, violence, and all these things that were prevented when we had temperance in the church. Now we have a runaway situation with a lot of these kids experimenting with same-sex activity.
Right.
What is the church doing in
Right.
providing sex education in the church to prevent these things?
Okay, let me just correct you on one thing, sorry, before they answer. Even when we had temperance, stuff was going on because we're not real. We're not real about talking about these issues. This conversation that we're having here, while long overdue, needs to continue. So this is the first of many that needs to occur. But let me allow the sex education, I think it's a valid point. What are we doing to educate our young people about sex? Are we just saying to them, don't have sex, the Bible says no, and that's it? But we don't have a curriculum. Family ministries, I'm sure there's something here.
So, Brother John Williams, I do agree with you that we are, as a denomination, as a conference, as local congregations, we are woefully lacking in that curriculum. But earlier in the conversation this evening, we talked about the fact that sexuality as a conversation has been taboo among us. And so we have a long way to go to get to where we need to be. And the first thing that's required is us to just acknowledge the critical component of human being, which is sexuality. All of us got here that way. I mean, even those who came through in vitro fertilization, you know, there had to be human sexuality to even get you in the dish to come. So every one of us came through the fact of what God created as human being, male and female, created he, them. So why, I mean, we don't need to go over again why the conversation is lacking. What we need to do is just to start from here and put in place the curriculum that, you know, you're talking about, from our youngest children all the way up to our biggest open public meetings like what we're doing right now, even preaching about it at, you know, 11 o'clock service. The conversation for human sexuality as a thing that's God-given, as a blessing to human beings, we need to have the conversation. And that's what we're doing now.
And you know, I'm not going to answer the question directly, but I'm encouraged, and I'm going to encourage you also. Because at our last workers' meeting, was it last year, last fall, or the year before, there was an attorney, a Seventh-day Adventist attorney from California, and he spent 2 days with the pastors, with all their leaders at Camp Victory Lake. That's where we have workers meeting. And the topic was LGBTQ and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. No, LGBTQ plus.
IA, yes.
And the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And for 2 days, the pastors had that conversation. The attorney was able, and then he offered us a course to take to get a degree, the pastor and the law. And it had a lot to do with that information.
Yes.
So I'm encouraged that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is opening their eyes.
Yes. There was the final question from the gentleman here. Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I would like to say, what have the research, have the conference done about on the percentage of sex abuse in the church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and within the community? Is it very high among us race as a black race? What research have they done?
Okay.
I'm not just picking on our race individual as site now, but I'm saying every time something happened in the black community, we lead in negative statistics. And I would like to see positive things come.
We used it on the flyer.
You know,
so what are we doing to help prevent that?
Yeah, we used it on the flyer actually. The stats of 1 for every 6 boys, 1, and for every
Seventh-day
4
Adventist
girls,
Church.
I think
I
it
didn't
is,
write it in this book.
1. But yes, in the black community, the stat is in the black community, which is the church, really, our church.
Right.
I am so sorry. The statistics is right up there about the black community, and our church actually mirrors the black community. But I feel so bad because I actually wrote it down, but I brought the wrong book. Because there is some statistics in our claims file of what has been reported, because there were 739 claims I know that was reported, but then it was broken down, the 739, then it was broken down into the type and the actual people that were involved, like how many involved pastors, how many involved deacons, how many involved children against children, how many involved teachers, and how many involved different. And I apologize because I meant to bring that information, because I asked for that information knowing I was coming here, and they sent me the information. And
Maybe
I
Tiffany can
apologize.
get that information and maybe share it in some way. It would be good that if we could, yes, we could probably get it from Sister Hall and in some way share it so
Yeah.
people can look out for it.
Okay, I'll send it to Tiffany because I have it. I can send it to you as soon as I get home because the statistics is there from the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yes, we want one final comment from our panelists as we close. One thing that you want us to remain or leave with, our takeaway should be today. So I'm going to ask each one of you to share that.
I'm certainly hopeful, and I applaud Flatbush Church to begin this conversation of unmasking and debunking the myth about sexual abuse among us. I want to ask all of us to know, even if we are not saying it now, we all have our own stories. If you've been abused, you're not alone. Even as an adult, there is still help. You don't have to, to continue the hurt and the pain because of fear and shame. You could begin to release and be free. I think of the butterfly, and that's what I look for and offer to you, that you can be free from all of this. And the church, I wouldn't comment on what the church, I'll leave it for the pastor and thing.
Well, I like that, Sonia. Encouraging us to take action to be free, because that's one of my focuses is to encourage us to be free. It's when we're not free to be that we're experiencing suffering, hurt, pain, or abuse or something like that from someone. So be free. But my word is vigilant. I encourage us to remain vigilant. Now that you are part of the conversation, be vigilant and look for opportunities to open up a freedom for others, and look for opportunities to decrease and to end this sort of behavior among us. So if you, as they say in New York City, if you see something, say something. And allow for our children to have the power to say something for themselves as well, and keep all of us safe. Thank you.
And I just want to echo by saying thank you for the opportunity of being here, and thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the initiative to say something, because by being here, you're saying something. My leave is that our children are our most important asset. We have a duty to protect them. It's our duty. When they enter our church, it's my responsibility and each person's responsibility to ensure that they are able to worship in a safe environment. So each of us need to make ourselves a committee of one and be diligent in ensuring that our children are safe within the walls of our church.
Amen. One more thing.
Yes.
I just, speaking on behalf of the Northeastern Conference and this administration, Family Life Ministries, I'd just like to acknowledge Tiffany Llewellyn
Yes. Just gonna do
and
that. Adventist Social Justice.
Adventist for Social Justice.
Yes.
And I'd like to acknowledge Norca Blackman Richards and For Real Women International. And all of my team members,
Yes.
like Sonia Smith and Barbara Hall, for the job of setting this up and for you for allowing for it.
Yes.
God bless you all as
Yes.
we continue to move forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, if there's anything that we can take away from this evening is let's stop asking why it's not been done. Let's get it done. All of us are empowered. We need to do something. Let's do something. Please give yourself a hand for being here, for sticking it out. Let's give the panelists a hand, the courageous ladies a hand, Tiffany Llewellyn and Adventist for Social Justice a hand, Northeastern Conference of Family Ministries and For Real Women International. It was good. God bless you. Tiffany?
Thank you all so very much. Really quickly before before the panelists, before you all leave, I want to connect you with Colin. He's in the back. He had a really good question about special needs kids who might not be able to verbalize or express if they are being abused. So we really want to be able to touch on that, and unfortunately we don't have the time to do it largely, but hopefully we can do a follow-up. So thank you all so very much. At this time, I'm going to ask Pastor Marks to come and close us off with prayer, and then we will officially end.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Barnes in her absence for choosing Flatbush. I know it's been a long day for all of us, except you were not in church this morning. And may I see the hands of those who just got up at 2 o'clock and are still fresh. But if you were in church all day, it's been a long day. But this has been one of the better evening conversations we've had in our church. Lots of emotion in the room, and a lot of education as well. I wouldn't say all that's on my heart, except that I think there's some things we can keep talking about, and there are some things we cannot afford to keep talking about. And quite frankly, coming out of the Southern New England Conference during that crisis in the Boston Archdiocese, changed my approach to this. This is not something for us to pass on to the next committee, the next person, and hope. As a father, I sat there this evening and I was wondering if I need to ask my daughters, who are now in